Chapter 1. When dreams begin to bleed into reality, dreams are supposed to be safe. They're meant to vanish with the sunrise, dissolving like mist when we open our eyes. But what happens when they don't? What happens when a dream follows you, stalks you, and finally steps into the waking world? Tonight, you'll hear stories from people who swore their nightmares were not just figments of imagination, but warnings, messages, or something much darker trying to claw its way into reality. Let's begin. Story 1. The girl in the red dress, Clara, was 16 when the dream started. Every night, she dreamt of a girl in a tattered red dress standing at the end of her bed. The girl never moved, never spoke, just stood there, her head tilted slightly to the side, watching. Clara would wake up in a panic, her sheets damp with sweat, but by morning she convinced herself it was only a dream. Then came the night when she reached out. In the dream, Clara sat up and whispered, "Who are you?" The girl in red finally moved. She stepped forward, her bare feet leaving dark prints on the floorboards. Clara jolted awake, only to find those same wet footprints leading across her real bedroom floor. Her parents thought she was imagining things, but 2 weeks later, a fire ripped through the abandoned house across the street. The firefighters found the charred remains of a girl, still wearing what was left of a red dress. Clara never dreamed of her again. Story 2. The falling dream. For years, James had the same nightmare. He was standing on a cliff, looking down at the dark ocean below. Every time, the ground crumbled beneath his feet and he fell, his body plummeting endlessly until he woke up, gasping. But one night, the dream changed. This time, he didn't wake up before hitting the water. He felt the cold sting of impact, his chest tightening as the ocean swallowed him. When he finally broke free and awoke, his bed sheets were soaked, not just with sweat, but with water. Salt water. 3 days later, James drowned in a boating accident near that same cliff. His friends swore he'd looked terrified before he slipped into the sea, as if he had already seen his death coming. Story 3. The stranger who called her name Melissa lived alone in a small apartment, and for months she kept dreaming of a man standing outside her window. His face was blurred, his voice low, but every night he called her by name. "Melissa, Melissa." At first, she brushed it off as stress. But then the dreams grew violent. She dreamt of him breaking into her apartment, grabbing her wrist, whispering words she couldn't quite understand. She'd wake up shaking, with phantom pain around her arm. Then one night, she woke not in her bed, but on the floor by her locked front door. Her wrist throbbed with a fresh bruise in the shape of a hand. Terrified, she installed extra locks and avoided sleeping. But the police later confirmed something chilling. Her upstairs neighbor, a man she barely knew, had been arrested for stalking another woman in the building. He confessed that he often stood outside Melissa's window at night, watching her sleep. Story 4. The shadow at the hospital. Anthony was in and out of the hospital with chronic illness. Painkillers left him groggy, and sleep was his only escape. But when he slept, he dreamed of a tall, thin shadow that stood in the corner of his hospital room. The figure never touched him, but Anthony felt its eyes on him. One night, he dreamt the shadow finally moved closer and whispered, "It's time." Anthony woke with a jolt, heart racing. He pressed the nurse call button, but before anyone could reach him, his heart monitor flatlined. When the nurse entered, she swore she saw a dark shape vanish against the wall. She still won't talk about it. Dreams are supposed to be meaningless, scattered reflections of our day. But some dreams don't stay dreams. They bleed into the waking world, leaving evidence, injuries, and sometimes death. And this was just the beginning. Chapter 2. The nightmares that wouldn't let go. Some dreams are brief flashes, disturbing but forgettable. Others linger like smoke, refusing to leave your lungs. These are the nightmares that stay with you, chasing you even after you wake, until you start to wonder if you'll ever truly escape them. These stories are about people who are haunted, not once, not twice, but relentlessly, as though something inside the dream wanted to follow them home. Story 5. The black dog that waited since childhood. Maria dreamt of a black dog with glowing eyes sitting at the foot of her bed. It never barked. It never growled. It only watched her. As she grew older, the dream followed her from house to house, city to city. By her 30s, Maria had nearly forgotten about it, until she began seeing the dog in places she was awake. First, in her hallway mirror. Then, in the reflection of her car window. Always sitting, always watching. One night, she jolted awake to the sound of claws scraping against her wooden floor. She turned on the light, and for the first time, she saw it. Not in her dream, but standing at the end of her bed, waiting. The next morning, Maria was found dead in her sleep. Her family swore they heard scratching on the bedroom door before they broke it open. Story 6. The man in the corner, Caleb, suffered from sleep paralysis, but one nightmare stuck with him more than any other. Every time he drifted off, he found himself frozen in his bed, unable to move, while a tall man in a wide-brimmed hat leaned out from the corner of his room. The man never spoke, but Caleb felt an unbearable pressure in his chest, like the shadow was stealing his breath. Doctors told him it was his mind playing tricks, but Caleb wasn't convinced. One night, Caleb recorded himself sleeping with a camera pointed at his bed. At 3:15 a.m., his body jolted violently, his chest heaving. And then, for 3 frames, just 3, something dark and tall appeared in the corner, a shape that hadn't been there before. Caleb never slept again without the lights on. Story 7. The dead child Samantha was a nurse who often worked late shifts. Exhausted, she would collapse into bed and dream of a little boy standing in her living room. His face was pale, his eyes empty, and every time he would whisper the same words, "Why didn't you save me?" She tried to brush it off as stress, until one day she looked up old obituaries from the hospital. There he was. The boy had died in the ER during one of her shifts, his body crushed in a car accident. The nightmares didn't stop. Instead, they grew worse. He began showing her his injuries, his broken ribs, his bloodied mouth. And always, he asked the same question, "Why didn't you save me?" Samantha eventually quit her job, but the boy still came every night. She hasn't had a dream without him in over 10 years. Story 8. The voice in the walls Michael's nightmare wasn't an image, but a sound. For weeks, he dreamt of whispering voices inside the walls of his bedroom, soft and unintelligible. In the dream, he would press his ear to the wall, and the voices would suddenly grow louder, shouting, screaming, begging. He woke one night drenched in sweat, his ear burning as if someone had been screaming directly into it. The next evening, he noticed something strange, faint scratching sounds coming from behind the drywall. When he finally called a contractor, they made a horrifying discovery. Behind the walls, they found the remains of a man who had been missing for over a year. Michael moved out that same week, but he still hears whispers in his sleep. These aren't just dreams. They're obsessions, forces that refuse to let go once they've found you. People think waking up means safety, but these stories prove that sometimes it only means the nightmare has changed its form. In the final chapter, you'll hear what happens when the dream world doesn't just follow you, it claims you completely. Chapter 3. When the dream world claims you, dreams can haunt you. They can warn you, but sometimes they do something far worse. They take you. The final stories are about people who didn't just experience nightmares. They became part of them, as if the dream world reached out and pulled them inside. Story 9. The Endless Staircase. Evan was an architecture student known for his vivid dreams. But one nightmare returned again and again. An endless, spiraling staircase leading down into darkness. No matter how far he descended, he never reached the bottom. One night, he told his roommate he was going to find the end. He laughed it off as a joke, but that night, Evan never woke up. His body was alive, his heart still beating, but he slipped into a coma doctors couldn't explain. The strangest part? When his family visited him, his legs kept moving under the hospital sheets as though he were walking. Always down. He's been in that coma for 7 years, still climbing those stairs in a dream he'll never escape. Story 10. The house that didn't exist. Lena dreamed of a house every night. A two-story Victorian with cracked windows and ivy crawling up the walls. Inside, she heard footsteps, whispers, doors opening and closing on their own. One day, she drove through a neighboring town and froze. There it was, the house from her dreams, exactly as she remembered it. Against her better judgment, she pulled over. The house was abandoned, but the front door creaked open as if it had been waiting for her. Lena stepped inside, her heart hammering. Neighbors later said they saw her enter around 6 p.m. She never came back out. When police searched the house, they found no trace of her. But they did find something chilling in the dust of the upstairs bedroom. A single line drawn with a finger. It read, "I finally made it home." Story 11. The dream that predicted death. Thomas was a firefighter who kept a dream journal for fun. But then the dreams began showing him accidents before they happened. A car crash, a house fire, even a drowning at the lake. At first, he thought it was coincidence, until the events kept happening exactly as he had written them. One night, he woke in terror after dreaming about his own death. 2 weeks later, he responded to a warehouse fire. His crew swore they saw Thomas hesitate, frozen in fear before running in. The ceiling collapsed within minutes. When they pulled him out, his journal was found in his jacket pocket, open to the last page. The words read, "I won't wake up from this one." Story 12. The final sleep. Isabella had always been fascinated by lucid dreaming. She practiced every night, teaching herself to control her dream world. But the more she explored, the more she realized something terrifying. She wasn't alone there. She spoke of figures she couldn't control, shadows that moved on their own. One in particular haunted her, a faceless man who whispered, "Stay." One morning, Isabella didn't wake up. Her body lay motionless in bed. No signs of struggle, no medical explanation. Doctors labeled it sudden unexplained death during sleep. But her family discovered her dream journal on the nightstand. The last page had only 3 words written in her shaky handwriting. "He kept me." Dreams are supposed to end when we open our eyes. But these stories prove that for some, the dream is only the beginning. Nightmares aren't just illusions, they're doors. And sometimes, when you step through, you don't come back. So tonight, when you close your eyes, ask yourself one question. Are you the one dreaming, or is something dreaming of you?